It's now 12:30, so we'll get underway. Welcome everybody to another webinar in the Red and the Black series. This one's on how to collect your debts. I'm Stephen Michelle. I'm a director of PCI Partners. For those that don't know us, we're an insolvency firm doing corporate liquidations and insolvency matters, and also personal insolvency matters. And we welcome you to contact us if you or any of your clients need our assistance. Today, I'm privileged to have Jody Bedoya and Luke Whiffen present with me and actually give us their experience in relation to how to collect your debts. So Jody is a founding director of eMatrix. eMatrix is a training company. Jody began the company as she saw a gap in practical training and guidance for frontline staff, team leaders and managers in communication and understanding the psychology behind collections. eMatrix has worked at best practice level with government and commercial clients. She's held key executive, operational and training management roles, including being the CEO of Recoveries Corporation Limited. Welcome, Jody.
Thanks, Dave.
And we also have Luke Whiffen, who's a founding director of Hilton Bradley. So Luke, as a founding director, has more than 20 years experience as an insolvency and commercial litigation practitioner. Luke acts for a number of company liquidators and bankruptcy trustees, including ourselves. He regularly advises creditors, debtors and insolvency administrators on all aspects of litigious corporate and personal insolvency. Luke specialises in recovering property or compensation for the benefit of creditors of insolvent companies. He conducts commercial litigation in all jurisdictions, particularly in the Federal Court of Australia and the Supreme Court. So again, welcome Luke today, and thank you both for taking the time out to share your knowledge with the audience today. So this session is going to be broken up into really two components. One is how you try and collect your debts without going to Luke, I suppose. And then the next bit is, what does it actually look like when you do go to Luke and have to take legal action? In terms of how we'll run today, there is a chat function on Zoom, and we welcome you to ask your questions through that. Chris Rowlands, who's also present with us today, will control all that side of things, but we'll answer those questions at the end of the presentation. These sessions are designed to be short and sharp, and we'll try and have you out and finished around 1 o'clock. Okay, so without further ado, Jody, I'll ask you a few questions to start with, because I mean, these are pretty important times at the moment, and cash flow is really critical, as it has been always, but probably more so these days with the effect of COVID and what have you. When's the right time to start following up on any overdue account or debts?
Well, I'm an old debt collector, Steve, so I'm usually 1 to 2 days after the due date, but really you wouldn't want to be leaving it more than 5 days, I wouldn't have thought. So beyond the due date, I think it's about having a clear process though, because then you leave it open to staff discretion and bias, and which clients you like, and that one's a family member, and it opens it up to I think, as I said, personal bias. So it's about having a clear process, probably no longer than, I'd say, 5 days. And that stops the risk of going, a lot of companies go from 0 to 100, they do nothing and then they whack them with a legal notice. So there's, in between those 0 and 100 days, there's a lot of work you could be doing.
Okay. And when, what sort of form of communication should that take? Because one of the things that we generally get asked as insolvency practitioners when we're asked to about collection of debts, of course, we're at the other end of the scale, where we just want the money to come in straight away. But I know that there's a lot of organisations that are out there, and they're worried about, actually talking to their clients and what effect that might actually have on, maybe future sales and the relationship. So, what sort of, how do you actually ask that difficult question?
Yeah, well, We tend to default to letters because we think that's easier, right? Because then I don't have to talk to the customer. But we know people don't read letters. People just don't read them. It's a dying art. And as a small business owner, I can tell you I don't read any of them. But we know 100% of SMSs get read. Whether they're actioned or not, they get read. So we kind of, our theory is send an SMS first because it's kind of the warm up, right? Before you get to the conversation, before you have to pick the phone up. So an SMS is the warm up, but it's got to be well worded too. If you're going to write an SMS, you actually have to think about your branding, your relationship with the customer, and what's the messaging you want in that SMS. So that's the warm up before you make the call. And for anyone that's overdue, a phone call is the only way that you can really understand what's happening for your customer and why aren't they paying. Because without that conversation, how will you know? And one of the things we're going to talk about is it's always about willingness and capacity to pay. And so it's only through a conversation where we pick that up. But one other key thing around SMSs, it can't be a one-dimensional SMS like, you know, you need to pay. Because if I pick that up, I'm going to go, okay, well, I need to be able to click something that sends me through to the payment channel. Because if you make that an extra step for me and you're going to make it hard for me, and particularly as a small business owner, well, you know, I've got other crap to do like run a business. I haven't got time to go in and find an email from your company and pay it. So if you are going to have an SMS, make it easy in terms of how to pay it. And I had a friend yesterday. She said she had a council fine and I think the payment method wasn't working. And so she had to go down to council and she said to me, they can get stuffed. I'll leave them till last then because they've just made it hard for me.
Interesting. So, who should actually, I mean, organisations, you know, a lot of organisations are split into, you know, they've got different departments and areas. You've got the sales guys who might be incentivised in terms of trying to get sales through the door and trying to push as much product or services onto a client, because that obviously helps them in terms of bonuses and commissions and what have you. And then you've got the finance department who are saying, well, why aren't we getting this money? Who do you think is best placed to actually make those initial calls?
Yeah, not sales. I think you've got to split that function out, and it's got to be someone that's independent, arm's length. It is all about it's got to be an objective conversation, doesn't it? Because the minute you're bringing in the sales and the commission, well, it's not a sale till it's paid, is it? So it's also, if you're a small business, sometimes collections is a really tricky skill set, and we've seen it given to a function, but within that function, you've got the wrong person and they're not actually the right person to make the call. So it does depend. In a smaller business, it sometimes is about finding the person that's the best person for that job too. If you don't.
So in a micro business, is that something that the owner should be doing? Is that part of that, you know, that relationship building and communication piece, or should the owner try and get somebody else to do that, maybe the bookkeeper or?
Yeah, I think leave the, you need some leverage. You've got to leave something in your back pocket. So you kind of want your owner or a director as the, you know, that you can use them as a bit of leverage. So yeah, a bookkeeper or someone, I think in finance makes the most sense, but it's also got to be someone that is comfortable having that conversation.
Yeah. And what would you do? Let's say you've got, you've got your finance area that's trying to who's rung up the customer and says, well, you know, why aren't you paying? We need that money to come through, and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden they then make the phone call, that they go off the phone to the finance area, and they immediately pick up the phone and ring the sales area to complain that they've been contacted. What sort of advice would you give, say, both areas as to how to deal with that sort of situation?
Yeah, it's a good question. One of the things we find is people are put in a collections role and they're told, go collect. But you can't get someone to make a collections call without training them on how to objection handle. And you've got to have consistency across your business, whether it's sales or finance or collections, in what are the questions you're going to ask a customer or a client to make them accountable. And it's interesting, we fear that they're going to complain, but guess what? They know they owe the money. It's not a surprise, and they're actually waiting for that call. So the only time they will complain usually, unless it's a dispute about what you're charging, will be the way you spoke to them and the way you made them feel. So if you call someone and you're perhaps a little bit judgy, maybe you've done their books and you know they can bloody afford it because they bought a new Mercedes, and you're thinking, well, why haven't you paid me? That judgment will come out in the language, and that's what people react to. It's not the fact they owe the money. They know they owe the money. It's how it's handled. And if you talk down to me, well, yeah, you've pissed me off, so I will complain.
So, you know, when it comes to listening to a customer and maybe the reason why they're not paying, how do you then identify between maybe some genuine type circumstances, like my business has been closed for 6 or 8 months due to COVID, compared to just an excuse for non-payment? How do you identify, how do you make that?
Oh, that just dropped out there.
No, still there.
Oh, sorry, it's just frozen there for a sec, Steve. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, this is one of the problems with technology, isn't it?
And again, it's asking the right questions. So if you and I have enough trust in the conversation, I can say something to you like, Steve, you know, we've had a number of conversations and I can see the account hasn't been paid. Can you talk me through what's happening for you that's stopping this from being paid? And I'm going to wait to see what you say. And the next thing you say, I'm listening for, is it a capacity issue here or is it a willingness issue? Because if you say to me, well, I've got other bills and that, I'm probably going to say, well, where are you prioritising us? And I'm going to ask, they're very, they're specific questions to try and work out where are we sitting in this. And based on that question, if you can't answer it, then I probably know you're bullshitting me, versus a genuine person will go, well, I've got this going on and this going on, and they can reel it off. So it's asking the right questions to try and ascertain what's going on for you. Are you serious about paying us, or are you buying some furniture for your house instead?
What do you think about training clients? I think that you know, over the years, I've heard this concept that you know, when you get a new client on board and you start onboarding them, one of the things is to try and train them to actually respond to, you know, to make sure that you're one of the first in the queue to actually get paid, and because they know that ultimately if they don't pay your bill on time or shortly when after it's due, that they're going to get a phone call, or they're going to get, you know, someone's going to follow them up. And what do you think about that?
Well, I think back to your first question, when's the best time to call them? That's why it's really important to have a process and follow it. So you're building expectation from the minute they sign up. They know that's the process, that they're going to get, you know, perhaps that they get their invoice, falls overdue, they get an SMS, and then they get a phone call. So it's no surprises, and people don't feel like they're being discriminated against or picked on. That is just the process. So it's being upfront with that and following it.
And when would you sort of say stop supply or you know, cut somebody off in terms of further credit? At what point would you do that?
It's back to that willingness. So willingness is, so you don't want your staff spending time on customers that are, you know, you've given them enough opportunity. Perhaps you've had a couple of convos, they're telling you again they're paid, it's maybe the second time it hasn't come through, or you're just hearing no willingness and they're saying things like, oh, you're just the accountant, you know, leave you till last, you blokes, you know, I've got other bills to pay. The minute we hear a willingness trigger, we let process look after that. And that's where you'd absolutely go, Luke's, that's over to Luke.
Yes.
You don't want to spend more time on something that you've just heard they're not going to pay you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's, I remember talking to an industry group at one stage, and, you know, they raised this question of, you know, we're already into this particular client for, you know, $200,000, and we're scared that if we don't continue to supply them, that all of a sudden they'll fall over. And I mean, I've got to say, my simple answer to that is, well, okay, so you advance them another $100,000 worth of goods or services. So they're into you for 300,000, and then they fall over and you get nothing. And how long does it take you to actually earn that money back? How much profit do you have to generate? So I think that probably leads to you, Luke, in terms of, when do you start to escalate legal action? They've said that you're struggling to get payment out of them. What really are those first steps that you would do?
Well, first of all, look, as Jody's put forward, time matters. So the longer you leave it, for a number of different reasons, the worse it will be. If their position deteriorates, you'll be in a worse position. If they get the feeling that they can put you at the bottom of the list, you'll be in a worse position. So you need to be active and you need to be quick about either using the processes that Jody showed, and once you figure that those processes really are ineffective, you need to be onto them. And you can do a number of things, and one of the things is getting a lawyer involved. People will take it a lot more seriously. Now, in terms of the actions available, they fall into two broad categories. You've got your corporate debtors and you've got your individual debtors. They might be sole traders, for example. Starting first with the corporate debtors, they tend to be the legal process is a lot smoother and a lot quicker and generally more successful, because the courts say, look, if you're in a company, then there's certain rules you've got to play by, and you're not just a mum and dad. You're running a business, so you need to pay your debts, and they're fairly harsh on them. There are a number of options open. You can issue a statement of claim, but we find that is an unnecessary step. And a few lawyers will ask you to do that because probably they're not really thinking about it and they're happy to charge you for it. The first step we recommend is for a corporate debtor is straight to a statutory demand. And that's an instrument under the Corporations Act where your debtor has, provided the debt's over $2,000, you can issue it. They've got 21 days to pay. It's a very harsh deadline. It's not like a statement of claim where you can file a defence and you can push people around for months, if not years on end. They've got 21 days to comply with it. If they don't, you can bring a winding up proceeding immediately, and then they'll have 4 weeks to pay. Otherwise, the company gets shut down. It'll be given to an insolvency practitioner such as Stephen, and he'll be doing his best to get assets out of that company to pay creditors. So it's quite a strict regime, but beneficial for creditors. For individual debtors, you'll need to do a statement of claim. Hope they don't file a defence, which will be a sort of a BS defence to an undisputed debt. Then you'll have to get default judgment. You'll have to put it on the back of a bankruptcy notice, which is effectively your individual's version of a statutory demand, and then you can bring bankruptcy proceedings. A lot to cram in there, but I think the main point is, 1, you need to do it quickly, and 2, there are 2 broad approaches to get your money. Corporate seems to be better.
Sometimes when we might have a judgment that we've obtained in relation to trying to recover a debt, and then the suggestion is that maybe we should get the sheriff's office involved or do an oral examination. Do you want to make a comment on those? Why you would go probably more towards the statutory demand side of things rather than maybe go down that route of trying to get the sheriff to go and repossess some assets?
Well, I can give you a fairly quick answer. It's speed and effectiveness. The statutory demand process, in practical terms, can go from 0 to being completed in 8 weeks. That's if no one pays. We find the vast majority of occasions people pay, and they pay promptly, because that regime means, it's a game of sudden death for them. So you'll find you'll get put to the top of top of anyone's list very quickly. The sheriff has no vested interest in it. The sheriff will go out to the property, any type of excuse, the sheriff will go away. You'll talk to the sheriff, they'll get back to you in 2 weeks, they'll go to the property in another 2 months, and you'll go through that process. And getting them to do anything might take 6 months, then they'll have to sell any property. And instead of an 8-week process, you can be looking down the barrel of a 6 to 12 months process. So we never use it because it's something from bygone era. Yeah, just ineffective.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's certainly the experience that we actually have as well. In terms of cost involved in taking those types of legal action, can you give a bit of an outline as to what would be involved from a cost perspective?
I mean, we can go on about the legals all day, but the practicalities of it is, you know, the cost of it, because if you've got a $10,000 debt, are you going to put $8,000 on the table to see if you can get it? And you might not, then you'll be down the hole for 18,000. So we run what is a fairly unique product in that we do our debt collection on a no-win, no-fee basis. So that if you do not get yours or your client's money back, then you don't see a bill from us. The only time that you'll see a bill from us is when we're successful in collecting the debt, and we will, of course, be collecting your costs off the debtor. So it won't be a case where you will be handing across any money. So it takes out the risk of, well, if I have a $10,000 debt, am I going to have to put more money on the table? No, you won't. You'll either see that $10,000 back, and if you don't, you will not be getting a bill from us. So the advantage of that product is that it takes the risk out of recovering a debt. It takes it off the table and gives you the freedom to pursue those debts, knowing that you're not going to get a big legal bill at the end. And it includes disbursements as well, so we pay the disbursements. So there won't be any out of pockets for you.
Yeah, it's pretty attractive sort of proposition, I would have thought, to most companies and individuals that are trying to collect debts. In terms of, I mean, you look at that, and what sort of, I mean, is there a sort of a limit as to, you know, maybe how small a debt might be? I mean, you know, let's say you had a debt for $3,000. Would you recommend you go down that track? Yes.
So statute of demand can be issued for any amount over $2,000. So, you know, if it's $2,000 or $2,500 or $3,000, the product is the same. The costs are the same. So it doesn't matter if you're chasing 3 million or 3,000. The costs stay the same. It's on a no-win, no-fee basis. So not only is it a very effective way of collecting debts, it's risk-free in terms of legal costs. It can be used for almost any debt. Under 2,000, yeah, you might have to look at a statement of claim, but that's a difficult sort of commercial prospect to make work. But anything over 2,000.
Okay, no, that's good. I think they're probably all the questions that I've got for today. But do you want to, Jody? Do you want to make any sort of comments in relation to maybe anything that Luke may have discussed?
The only thing I'm thinking is it's important for your staff to know the process, not for them to explain it to the customer, but once you know what's available to you on that side, it makes you more confident within the calls because you actually have clear direction in where to go. I'm reading some of the questions in the Q&A and it's around where do I go next? And so you're sitting there using up a lot of headspace going, should I, shouldn't I, what should I do? If you have a clear process, you're not wasting staff time on that. You go, okay, if they don't do this, this or this, then, you know, A, B or C, D happens.
So it's a nice streamlined process. Everyone knows what's going on and therefore there should be no surprises, I would have thought, down the track.
So it's not you having to understand the language or know exactly what happens, but understanding enough that you can say, look, we're at a critical point here because we've had this conversation numerous times and there is, now $15,000 outstanding. This is something that we will be getting legal advice on. And be comfortable
Chris,
So there are a series. Can you hear me okay?
yes, I'll hand over to you, Chris, to do the Q&A if you like.
Okay then. So look, there's a series of questions. The first one is from an anonymous attendee. I've tried emails, mobile numbers, SMS messages, landline, but my customer won't respond. What's the next stop? I think we've probably answered that, but would you like to comment on that, Jody?
Oh, I'd say straight to Luke. Like if that's my customer and I've done everything, that's telling me they got their head in the sand. I wouldn't waste one more minute on that.
Yeah, fantastic. I'd agree with that too. I've had about 40 years in debt collection, so I'd agree with that 100%. The rest of them are actually from Ian McKenzie, who's got a client who's a sole trader bricklayer. He's completed work on 4 units. The bill has only been paid for one. The bill's only paid one for the first unit, but not paid the balance. No contracts, been 14 months, not answering calls. What's the next step of action? How much will it cost? Balance owing is 18,000. Ian suggested that Luke has answered his question, and can he have his details? I'll pass those on to you later on, Ian.
Thanks. We're happy to talk with Ian. I think we can get to the bottom of it fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that's all the questions are at the moment. Anyone else would like to jump in? They're quite welcome to do so.
Yeah. Okay. If there's no other questions, then one of the things I might just ask is, Jody, in terms of your company and what you actually do you want to give just a very quick, just a 5-second piece on exactly what sort of services your company actually offers?
Yeah, so pretty much we train on any horrible conversation you've got to have. So debt collection is our bread and butter, but hardship, vulnerability, family violence, suicide, performance, behavioural issues, you name it. So any yucky conversation you got to have, we train on it. But it's about giving staff the confidence in how to have difficult conversations with people, and then objection handling, of course, when people come back and don't like what you have to say. And it's about how you balance commercial outcomes. You've still got to maintain your customers and your clients, and you've got to make money, but at the same time, people owe the money and they've got to pay. So it's balancing those two things and teaching people how to handle that and being confident that they can do it.
Yep, thank you. And Luke, just any final word in relation to your business, or any advice that you can pass on?
No, look, we're here to help in terms of this particular topic, to help people collect their debts, to make it simple, to make it risk-free, and not be, your normal lawyer that will seek to perhaps just not partner with their client but profit from it. We're here to partner with you, and we believe in long-term relationships, and that's why we offer the no-win, no-fee basis.
Yeah, that's I would have thought that's very attractive to just about anybody that's trying to recover some debt. So, look, thank you very much for both of you to take the time out today to pass on your knowledge to the audience. We really appreciate it. And thank you all very much for taking the time to attend today. On that note, I think we've got about a minute to go, so I think we're right on time. Thanks again. Cheers.
Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah.